Hi, everybody. It's Susan. I'm here to share a little bit about Pluto in the very last degree of Capricorn and the first degree of Aquarius. So, the last degree of a sign, 29 degrees, what is technically the 30th degree of a sign, is always really intense. It's known as the anaretic degree. The first degree is equally intense for different reasons. So Pluto in the last degree of Capricorn is going to especially be around issues of fear and delusion and power struggles, what it is that we realize is the truth and where we see the truth is not being relayed to us. So these are really big issues that we're encountering socially right now, and especially privately in different ways, depending on how that lands in your chart, and especially if it lands on a personal point or a planet. So you're really going to be feeling uh, a squeeze, an intensity that you kind of can't avoid right now. The 0 degree is this maximum transformation point. It's kind of like the 29th degree is the recognition of the issue, the crisis, and then the 0 degree is dealing with it and starting over, starting something completely fresh and new. I want to also draw your attention to the intensity around communication and fear-based news. At the moment, this is coming to a head in issues around finance and issues around health, of course, and issues around war and conflict around the world. And we really have to be careful not to surrender to that. You know, this is something that we need to keep our wits about us about, because that energy around fear will have us losing power, and it has us making stupid choices. When we're afraid, we start to feel that there are enemies all around us. We start to look at people, and this is what is being done to us deliberately, is to try to pit us against other people, other nations, other cultures, and we mustn't fall into this trap. It's deeply manipulative. It's been going on for decades already, probably 80, 90 years already behind the scenes. It's becoming really, really powerful now, really obvious. And especially, you know, the idea of fear around China, fear around Iran, fear around Russia, all of these things, this is highly propagandized, and you have to recognize that there is a lot behind that manipulation. And so please also recognize where you are reacting to what is being told to you without realizing what is actually happening behind the scenes. And this is Pluto at the 29th degree, starting to become clear of what is actually going on. If we go back, let's say from the financial point of view, the end of 2007, the, let's say, second half of 2007, and the very beginning of 2008, when Pluto was just at the 29th degree of Sagittarius and moving into the 0 degree, first degree of Capricorn. We had this same confusion, this whole spreading of disharmony around finances, around who gets what. There was then the financial collapse, the banking collapse, the housing collapse. And the people who basically profited from that are the same people who are in power right now and who are dealing with this financial and banking crisis currently. And these people stand to gain an enormous amount of money from this. And once again, the people, the general public, are the ones who are paying the price for that. So keep in mind that the fear is often stirred up with a particular target. In this case, right now, it's cryptocurrency. So I'm absolutely agnostic on cryptocurrency. I'm not in the game at all. People keep asking me for the astrology of cryptocurrency. I honestly don't want to go down that road, except to say that it's very, very clear that the recent crises that we've had over the last 6 or 7 months have been stirred up and are being used, at the very least, ex post facto, by authorities who want to then take over the crypto market. Now, there's evidence going back to 2020 that this was actually part of the plan, even 2019 and up to back to 2012. This is not new, so there has been a long, long discussion centered in the WEF, centered in countries like the US, Israel, the UK, for example, the Five Eyes, which are basically the Anglophone countries around the world: Canada, the US, UK, New Zealand, and Australia. And those countries are sharing information about banking and crypto. And they're using the idea that crypto, for example, is dangerous and that it's something that is used for criminal elements. And in fact, there's lots of really good research around this. And the latest research is that there's less than 1%, I think it's even like 0.3% of crypto transactions are used for any criminal purpose at all. So this is a big trope. It's something that they're developing to create some kind of fear around crypto and bring in the need to control, and more importantly, bring in then a government issued crypto, which is already being talked about long before this time. And now the crisis is where the opportunity comes in. And so these banking crises, when they're arising, we have to start to see who's benefiting from it and who is not actually being held responsible for it. Often they're the same people, and it's important then to see what's really going on behind the scenes, because the current crisis is something that is the direct result of the unresolved crisis from 2007 and 2008. And so we're at the peak extreme now. The very, very beginning, the 0 point was something happened, it needed a resolution. The solution was not a good one. It was not, let's say, an honest one. And we've been living for 15 years with the decay and the challenge around not having good financial systems until now. It's coming to a head. And so as Pluto is at this last degree of Capricorn, we are now going to see the extremes of that. Because Pluto keeps coming back over this point in 2023 and 2024, we're going to see this again and again and again. So this is going to just keep coming back for review. So once again, be careful, know what you're doing with your money, know your enemy, know yourself. These are really critical times, because you're going to have to be using a lot of your inner resources to be resilient to what is coming around us, socially, politically, economically. Um, I also urge you not to base your judgments on your opinions. Don't base your judgment based on what you would like to see happen. Don't base your judgment based on things like, I liked Obama, he was a great guy. That's not good enough. You have to really do your research and understand what's going on. And I'm only suggesting the United States because it's such a central player. If you look at any crisis around the world, the US somehow has a part in it, as if by chance. And so this is something that we want to understand. It's not about politics. That's another trope. That's another duality that wants to pit one person against another. It has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with, guess what, power and control, the ultimate Capricorn and Plutonian Capricorn words. So just reflect back on where you are giving up power. This can be, especially in these times, these last few days, Pluto has been squaring Venus. Very soon, Pluto is going to be squaring the nodes, and that's going to last most of the rest of 2023. So basically, from April through October of 2023, Pluto is squaring the nodes. And that's intense change. That's really intense. So I don't want to pretend that this is going to be an easy time, and I don't want to either frighten you as well, because some of you are very easily worried about these things, but you have to see this as a moment to step up and take responsibility, take personal responsibility for what's going on. That includes, especially around this Venus, with money, with your finances. How do you show up financially? Who do you give your power to with regards to money? And then, of course, Venus is also our relationships. So same thing. Are you taking control in your relationships to the extent necessary, not being controlling in relationships? That's not the point. But are you taking control? Are you taking responsibility? Maybe a better word. Are you being an adult in relationships, or are you finding that your relationships are taking advantage of you, and how's that working for you? This is going to be a crunch time this week, and next you will feel this very, very strongly. So right now I'm speaking on the 18th of March. This applies basically from, let's say, the 10th, 11th, 12th of March, all the way through till, I'm going to say till almost the end of March, basically. So Pluto will have just moved into the 0 degree of Aquarius. And then we get the 0 degree Aquarius Pluto, which is all about the sort of phoenix rising from the ashes. And what do we do about this now? And part of the challenge and why we need to be aware of what's going on in terms of manipulation and control, controlling the dialogue, controlling money, controlling systems, and so on, is that new building, which is going to be the 0 degrees of Aquarius, what is being rebuilt through networks, whether they be financial markets or government or social networks or our social structures of all kinds, that rebuilding is going to be based on the foundation of what we understand from that 29th degree of Capricorn. And so we have to look out for things like new structures. If we take the example of crypto, again, the idea that crypto is something of a criminal tool, and that when people believe that, when the general public is led to believe that, then they will more easily accede to the idea of control, government control. We need to do this instead. And this looks very much like, and this is what I'm seeing astrologically, and again, couldn't care less about crypto otherwise, but the idea is that the governments will then take over the crypto markets for regardless the Bitcoin and all the even the stronger ones, and take control on the premise that they're not safe, that there's a security issue at stake. This is that 0 degrees Pluto energy, and we need to be aware of that. This is a point of maximum transformation, the 0 degree point, and new starts, fresh new starts. But what is the foundation of the new start? So just like the 0 degree point of Capricorn offered a potential new start, for example, for the banking system, for the finance system, at that time, instead of punishing the bankers who actually created the housing crisis, who profited from the housing crisis, who caused immeasurable loss and suffering in the average person's life, basically wiping out the middle class. That was an opportunity for real change that was not taken. And instead, Obama literally pardoned, he literally excused the bankers who themselves admitted to expecting harsh treatment. They expected to be punished. They expected, at the very least, to be fined. They didn't get that. Obama literally said to them, and this is not a political debate, this is not about Democrat or Republican, this is about the what I would call the deep state, which Pluto and Capricorn has revealed to be a very, very powerful thing, has been known about for decades, but now most people know about it. It's even spoken about very broadly on social media or even on mainstream media. And those deep state operatives are the people who are actually running the show. So the president, whoever he is just he's kind of the spokesman. And so that Obama administration, let's not blame the person, basically gave them a pass. And the pass that they were given 15 years ago is what we're all dealing with now. And so we're now going to see that there's a heightened desire to control financial systems for security reasons. It's for your own safety, for your own good. Now, this will be applied whether it be medically or financially or in terms of the military. We have to protect you. We have to protect you from danger. And so give us the control and we will sort you out. Now, that has never actually worked out very well for most people. And so definitely keep in mind that a lot of what you're being told is absolutely not reliable. It's not something that we can fully rely on. We need to do our own research. That concept has been something that has been ridiculed, which is absurd. The idea that we shouldn't think for ourselves has been ridiculed over the last 3 years due to COVID. You're supposed to follow the science. You're not supposed to know. You're not supposed to do your own investigation. You're not supposed to have your own opinion. You have to be told your opinion and what is socially accepted. Beware that this is going to continue. This is definitely something that we are going to experience over the next few years. So, and again, I'm not trying to sound pessimistic. I'm trying to be realistic. I'm trying to show you how the game is being played on the media, and that especially is in the Anglophone media around the world, but we see it all over Europe as well. We see it especially with regards to Ukraine and the very deep manipulation that's going on around this conflict, and how the entire European economy is literally collapsing as a result of American pressures on NATO and the NATO pressures, therefore, on Europe. We're being ruled by people who are working in their own interest, in their short-term self-interest, and not in the interest of people. And this is where Pluto and Aquarius can start to make a difference. So that's what we saw 250 years ago or so during the revolutionary periods, whether it be in the US or in France, for example. There were other revolutions around the world, similar revolutions at that time, but the key ones that led to what we consider to be democracy today, kind of laughingly, is the French and the American Revolution. And that energy of revolution is where we start to recognize where the power actually lies. And this is also the energy of that 0 degree Aquarius, that very intense energy of kind of waking up from the nightmare, waking up and saying, hang on a minute, this isn't working for us. And wait a minute, how come there's more of us and they have more power? How does that work? And so this is about where we are collectively needing to show up very differently. We're collectively needing to be aware. Definitely do your own research. Don't let anybody tell you that that's a bad idea, that you're incapable of understanding what's going on. You're more than capable, but you won't find it in mainstream media. You won't find it in the usual channels. Recognizing that, the advertising that you see, whether it be in the New York Times or on different channels like NSNBC or any of those, notice that it's all paid for by big pharma, paid for you by Pfizer, paid for you by Raytheon, by any of the military industrial complex. And so they are the ones who are running the narrative. That's why the narrative's so rarely challenged on mainstream media. So do keep your wits about you, as it were, and start to think in terms of how it is that you can be aware of what's going on and don't fall into the trap of what's going on. Here where I live, for example, we're having less and less ease of access to cash. So it's really not easy to find a cash machine where I live in Brussels, capital of Belgium, capital of Europe. Now you have to go, to only random places in town to actually find one bank machine, where previously virtually every major corner or square would have 3 or 4 banks with several bank machines. So it's kind of crazy that this is actually a thing, but we are being corralled into a world where we're losing control over our own resources. And so once again, just keep your wits about you. I'm not going to give you investing advice. You definitely don't want that from me, but figure out what is the best way for you to protect yourself financially around this time where the next 2 years are pretty guaranteed to be quite unstable. The Pluto squaring the nodes, which is a very big thing coming up for us and will really color the 2023 period, is a really major evolutionary lesson for all of us, personally, particularly. So look for where that is, where the nodes are, and where Pluto is in your chart. Really start to follow that, track it, because as the nodes change in July, Pluto is also going back and forth between Aquarius and Capricorn again, and so it's tracking the nodes. In an unusual way. This is quite exceptional. It's not rare, but it's something that is rare enough that it's worth paying attention. And so this is a real change of direction. It's something that we're going to personally need to adapt to. And it's a need for radical transformation on the level of our society and also our own lives. So be prepared for letting go. Be prepared also for life not to look like what you thought it should look like. Be radically resilient. I would say that's probably one of the best solutions. Resiliency is your friend right now. And that means, don't look for Santa Claus solutions. Don't look for somebody to come and rescue you. Don't look for, definitely don't accept help from the government. They're not your friends. And so start to notice that all of these things are going to show up in your life in ways that you cannot predict directly, but you can kind of expect. And so brace yourself. If it looks like it's going to be financial, make serious, prepare yourself seriously for some kind of financial resilience. If it's going to come around health, prepare yourself for health resilience. I'll give you my example. I have a 29-degree Cancer rising that gives me 29-degree Capricorn descendant. When Pluto approached my descendant, I met somebody, and it was just this incredibly intense relationship, deeply, deeply karmic, deeply touching, very powerful connection. In many ways, very beautiful connection, but on every single level, it just touched all kinds of relationship trauma, let's say. It hit all those buttons in a way that allowed me to see clearly what was going on. And this whole relationship stuff, it didn't start in 2008, but it was highlighted as of 2008 very intensely. The second half of 2007, the first half of 2008 highlighted these questions of where I give my power away in relationship how I'm looking after myself. Am I including myself in relationship, or am I giving myself wholly to relationship? And after what I thought was 15 years of accomplished work on that subject, I realized at the very end degree what Pluto was showing me is where I hadn't understood that lesson. And I literally rescued myself from falling back into an old relationship pattern that is really not helpful. It can even be harmful for me. And so that I saw it. I saw it really, really clearly. And the great thing about Pluto is that there's no turning back. It's a clarity. Once you learn, once you understand the lesson, you get the clarity, you move on. And that's it. And this is where we are right now. This is where I am personally in regards to relationship. I have Pluto now moving towards my Venus. So this is really deep karma in terms of relationship. And we'll see what's next. I may or may not share with you. You'll see it, or you'll hear it in my voice. What's going on? But it's pretty intense, and all I'm saying is that it's empowering. And so you don't want to be. You don't want Pluto to wipe the floor with you. You want Pluto to teach you the lesson, and then you get back up and you say, "Okay, now I see where I was the one participating in the loss of my own power. I was giving that away. I was actually almost looking for trouble." So be careful if this is happening in a relationship house or in a finance house or in a health house. You want to be giving away your power. Um, yeah, and it's energizing, this clarity, by the way. That Plutonian clarity is deeply energizing and empowering. So again, I don't want you to, and I know I'm going to get this in the comments anyway. Oh, you're so doom and gloom. This is really negative. It's not the point. The point is we live in this world. This is the world we live in. It's not easy. Life is not easy. If your life is easy, please put that in the comments, because I'm fascinated and I'd love to meet you. And for those of us who are going through really, really difficult times right now, who are feeling that crunch, just know that this is not about punishment. It's not like something that you're supposed to be laying back and being subjected to. It's like, listen for the lesson inside, deep in your heart. You know what the lesson is. Often the lesson is going to be walk away. It's going to be don't stay and confront this issue with this individual. Take the lesson and go. And this is something that we can learn very, very much from each other. I love your comments, by the way. I love hearing your stories. Not that I love your pain. I do love your stories and your courage in sharing them. And I'm just sharing you mine in this particular example. Um, I want you to also think in terms of collectively that you pay close attention to the language that is being used when we're being spoken to about things arising. So if I take, again, I'm going to use the United States because it affects all of us. Unfortunately, this is the world that we live in. The US is very much a dominant power. This is part of the challenge that we're in, because much of the rest of the world has woken up to the fact that they really could say no to this unipolar world that the US wants to rule over. And this is where the tension is really greatest. And we see the greatest collapse happening in the countries that still, like Europe, for example, that still follow that idea that the West is right, that the West is the most appropriate and most adequate ruler of the world, that we know somehow better than other countries how they should be run, et cetera, et cetera. You know the story. And so this is something that we want to understand is being told to us in a particular way to create fear, to create division, and to create a sense that something needs to be done urgently. And you actually hear this on mainstream news, which I, by the way, don't watch, but I every now and then get snippets of it, because these are important things to understand are being said to the average person. This horrible thing is happening and somebody needs to do something about it. And the government steps up and says, we're here for you. We're going to do that. And whether this is about weather balloons and balloons that might be so terrifying as to need to send out, weaponry, the highest, most skillful Air Force pilots have to go and shoot down a hobby balloon to save Americans from China. These are the kinds of narratives that are being hyped up that make no sense when you really start to think about them. They make no sense. Um, and so understanding that this is something that is deliberately cultivating fear. We now are hearing the word contagion around the banking crisis. I can promise you, in 35 years of observing, no, God, 40 years, pretty much in observing, international relations, whether it be financial markets or political or military and so on. The word contagion was never used. And now, since the pandemic, since everybody's terrified and quite literally traumatized by COVID and what we've had to collectively go through, now we understand, based on zero science, um, this is all something that is being framed in the same way as to generate this fear around what is going on. So the contagion of financial markets going bad, or of banks going belly up, or of bank runs and then people being afraid and trying to take their money out of the bank, then not getting their money. This is now a contagion. I've never ever heard that expression used, and it's very deliberate. I can promise you that when you hear a government spokesman say use words like this, they have really weighed their words. They know exactly why and when to use those words. And same thing on social media or in the mainstream media, you're hearing the same words being used again and again and again. There is a narrative that you're being told to feel fearful, you're being told to fear the other, you're being told to fear the spread, this kind of crazy spread of instability, and you will be more manipulable. You will be more easily manipulated if you're afraid. And so you have to get over that. This is Pluto. Get over the fear. Do not let yourself be operated through fear. Don't let yourself buy into panic. Don't let yourself be that victim of this manipulation, which is actually has a deliberate purpose, because otherwise you're really going to lose the plot, and you're going to also lose the force or the energetic capacity to take care of yourself and your family and do what you need to do in your personal situation. Things, the main message here, again, for those of you who are freaking out and thinking I'm really being doom and gloom, the main message here is things are not as bad as they would have you believe. Things are not falling apart in the same way, although, some things are. Banks in some cases are literally falling apart, but it's not because of things that are irreparable. It's because of the corruption that's underlying them. Same thing with governments and so on. And so we have to understand that there is a much better, more positive, more constructive picture that we can focus on, that is not pie in the sky, but it's real. It's real. It's something that we can actually work with. And it's certainly individually, you absolutely can work on that, whatever is going on in your life. Individually, overcome that, and then collectively you can participate. If you're sitting in your corner freaking out by what is being told to you on the evening news, you're no good to the rest of society, because you're going to be a bigger source of challenge than anything that the government is going to do. So be careful how you're receiving this information. Be careful how you're perceiving your capacity for change and empowerment. I'm just checking my notes here because I had so many thoughts about this, and I've had coffee, so that's why I'm so excited about the whole thing. I don't normally drink coffee. So one thing I wrote down here was that the government wants to introduce a traceable digital currency. I touched on that already with the idea of taking over all of cryptocurrency on the specious notion that it's a risk to your safety, that this is being used for criminal purposes or hackers are using it. Such a tiny amount of that is the case that it's just not true. So again, do your research, figure that out for yourself. Um, and so the government is now using this banking crisis, hyping this banking crisis, the same thing with the FTX crisis of Sam Bankman-Fried, which I've done a video on last year in terms of how he was involved in this crisis, even though I don't have a birth time, which I do wish I had. Please put it in the comments if you know. And so this is something that they're using to justify this transfer of power. We see this again and again and again. We saw it during the COVID crisis, where the transfer of wealth was very, exorbitant, where people like Bill Gates profited immensely off saying that vaccines were necessary, important, they were helpful, they were going to stop the transmission, going to stop the illness, etc. Bill Gates sold his shares, something like $262 million dollars worth of shares in the mRNA vaccines, and thereafter once he made his money, he started saying these vaccines weren't that good. They haven't been efficacious. They haven't done the job. They've let us down. This is not the solution. This is not my opinion. This is all, you can find all of this on internet, on very open and legit forums. This is not conspiracy stuff. And again, I'm one of these people that believes that if somebody is labeling what you say conspiracy theory, you wear that like a badge of honor because it's usually the truth. And this I have seen very, very much over the last 20 years. And again, I'm not, again, trying to uh, tell crazy stories. I do my research and I do find I will never talk about something that I haven't seen evidence for in a number of different situations. That's part of my education, which is also lacking these days. People don't know how to do proper research. And so you're much more gullible. Not saying you're not. People are more gullible. And we need to have an understanding of what is good quality research, what is good quality information, who is trustworthy, who is actually supported behind the scenes by what financial interests. This is what I meant again earlier by know yourself and know your enemy, because your enemy is not the person that you think it is. It's not your neighbor. Um, so this dishonesty, this disinformation, and especially because you'll hear the government again and again and again, you'll hear media, mainstream media talking about the fear around disinformation, people spreading misinformation. Those are, if you know, we're talking in psychological terms, those are projections. This is all projection. What they're actually doing, they're projecting on other people, and that creates doubt and it creates a feeling of not being able to trust what other people are saying, and that's quite deliberate. It is absolutely deliberate. This is called fifth generation warfare, which we're experiencing right now, which is psychological warfare. This is about creating turmoil and confusion. In other words, you could call it gaslighting. If we were in a relationship one on one, that would be the term a psychologist would use. And it's what's happening collectively. Um, so with issues like banking and the war, issues around Iran, issues around China, we are not being told what is really true. And this is something that, again, is very easy to find. Like, let's just take the topic of China. About 9 years ago, I think it was in 2015, an excellent Australian journalist called John Pilger did a documentary called The Coming War with China, and to lay out how over the years prior, the United States had been building military bases encircling China, including in the South China Sea, using different islands and atolls to create bases on, putting bases all through Asia, literally surrounding China. And then the narrative, once they've done all of that, was China is aggressive. China is somebody that is a country we need to be careful of, and so on. Now, all of this is happening while China was accelerating their economic growth, becoming a threat economically to the United States, and also in terms of the power balance of the world, which is intolerable from the US point of view, from a foreign policy point of view. And so this narrative had to start that China was actually a threat. Never mind that China was producing virtually everything that Americans consume. Never mind that China was building its finances on the back of US debt, which was going to finance the wars that the United States was waging illegally, incidentally, around the world. And so all of this is very much part of the US foreign policy and has little to do with the actual truth of the situation, which is that China is not actually looking to threaten anybody. That's not really provable. You cannot find evidence of that anywhere, and that's something that again can easily be found if you know where you're looking and who are reliable sources. Do not go to NSNBC if you want a reliable source on something like this. Or Fox News or any of those for that matter. Although Fox News is now suddenly becoming a bit of a truth speaker to truth. I don't know what's going on there, but still take it with a grain of salt. And again, I don't have any political skin in this game. I'm an observer from afar, thank God, and I just look at what is emerging, what has become of media, what has become of politics, right and left around the world, and it's not what it appears to be. This is the crazy making part of it. Recently, the US, and I'll show you this in the US chart in a minute, the US has just created a situation where they are preparing to send in the military to Mexico, to their neighbor, their southern neighbor, with whom they have a treaty on trade, the NAFTA agreement. along with Canada, which has been to the detriment of Canada and Mexico since its inception. And and so the US is saying that the Mexican cartels are problematic and the only solution is to send in the military. This is an ally. This is an ally on the southern border of the US. The US sending in the military to resolve a problem that the US itself created, by the way. This is the cartels, the drug cartels throughout Central and South America were all funded and created basically by CIA operatives. That again, you can find information about countries that they have overthrown. There's a fantastic amount of countries that have been overthrown. I don't know, it's like in the 40s, something like that. Tens of or dozens of them, I guess we say in English, have been overthrown through undercover operatives like the CIA, including ally Iran in the 1950s when the Americans overthrew the Shah of Iran, previously an ally, and have pinned it as an opponent or an enemy even in the last say 40 years or so. But again, we'll see that in the U.S. chart; it shows up. Um, so crises always are about anti-democratic actions like military going into your next door neighbor, and they are not because of what you think they are. The U.S. is currently also invading Haiti for its oil, for its reserves, taking oil that actually belongs to Haiti. But because Haiti is in such turmoil, such chaos, they're able to do it. And if you're, again, doubting what I'm saying, then search for US military in Haiti. And don't go with the US government word on this. Go deeper. Go into like page 4 or page 5 of Google, if Google lets you find it, and otherwise use another search engine. So with the pointing of fingers around the world, whatever is being blamed, and again, I'm going to just generalize and say by the Western countries, because it's the US, but of course, it's all of the Western countries that follow that same narrative of we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. Wherever you find finger pointing, fingers of blame, when you find that accusation, question, is it projection? Is it actually the US or its allies projecting? And much of the time it is. So be careful of that. The finger pointing is a really good, clear indicator that we need to pay attention because there is never any absolute good or absolute bad in international relations. I can promise you that. These distractions also are a part of this desire to create chaos in order to take control. And so those distractions will also distract you away from the real problems. So we have, for example, Ukraine, where the US domestically is falling apart on every level, and it is quite catastrophic. And the focus is being drawn to China, to Iran, to Ukraine, anywhere but what is actually going on in the US. And the same can be said with virtually every other Western country. That doesn't change. That could be Germany, that could be France, that could be the UK, all three of which are really in dire situations right now, economically and socially. Last things that I want to say is that this international cooperation around the currency situation, around crypto, around the digital currency, it's designed specifically to not be private. It's your privacy online is being taken away, and the capacity you have for making your own financial choices is being taken away. The all of this is being explicitly done, and in the text of the agreement, which is called WEFPAC, WEFPACC, you can Google that one too. That crackdown on encryption, for example, or crackdown on personal freedoms and privacy and free speech. This is what they're using to destroy crypto, and this has been around already for a few years. That is all about this desire to take control, and so we're in this situation where they admit that it is going to happen outside of existing legislation, which means it's illegal. What they're doing, it's illegal, and they are acknowledging that it's illegal, and that's what the plan is to do anyway. So they're literally now basing treaties on what they know to be illegal. So they've dropped the pretense around these things. Let's have a look at the US chart, because this is something that shows a little bit what is going on through the United States, and then we'll leave it at that because I didn't want to make this a very long video. So if we look at, so this is today as I'm recording this, and if we look at the US chart that I prefer to use, the Sibley chart, this is something that is really illustrative of the end and beginning of something, the critical end and beginning. And because the US has become so dominant in our world politically and financially and culturally, it will create a very, very powerful ripple effect, not to say contamination, to use the mot du jour. And so here we have, of course, the US Pluto return, which has already been underway since 2022. We've already been experiencing that. In fact, it started in 2021. So we've had 2 years of that US Pluto return already. The exact pass, the last exact pass was 2022, but we're still experiencing that very much because this Pluto, while it goes into Aquarius next week, it's going to keep coming back to almost conjoin the 27-degree Pluto that is in the second house of the US chart. Now, what is the second house? The second house is what you have. It's the stuff that you have. It's your money. I'm talking in a mundane horoscope now. So the mundane horoscope is very similar to a personal horoscope, but it's not exactly the same. It will represent slightly different things. And so the second house is it's to do with all of the support systems, and that you could consider also the social networks as well, not social media networks, but meaning actual, real three-dimensional social networks. Infrastructure is part of this. What do we own? Do we have some bridges? Do we have the stuff of infrastructure, railways, and so on? And in fact, that overlaps with, because they are both a possession or something that is being owned as a resource, but also that overlaps with the networking and communications energy of the third house where Pluto is going to, which is where I think the major problems are going to start. If you think you already have infrastructure problems in America, wait until Pluto goes into Aquarius. And so this is that energy right now that is on the verge of really big change. This is also, of course, the house of money and finance. The third house is financial systems and exchanges. This is about, especially Aquarius. So Aquarius in the third house is doubling up that message of money markets, financial markets, of all kinds of exchanges. This would be cryptocurrency, for example, and then we've got Pluto going in there as of the 23rd of March. And so and of course, this is going to be the big theme for 20 years. We're going to still keep going back and forth over this point. I want to also point out that prior to this, if we go just a couple of years ago, when just before the Pluto return of the United States, so we're going back to, say, 2019, we had Pluto in opposition to the US Mercury. Now, Pluto is already opposite Mercury in the US chart. So this is about um, what you can describe, and this works with people as well. It's like unwelcome intervention. It's like meddling. This is a signature of meddling, where you feel like you need to tell everybody else what to do, how to do it, control speech, control the way people see things, control opinions, control ideas, and so on. If you know somebody who has natally Pluto opposite Mercury, you know what I'm talking about, because those people they have this kind of missionary zeal. It's like my way or the highway. It's like, this is what you need to believe. Now, unsurprisingly, this is in the US chart. And so we see that they are natally, they have this energy, and then that energy was being triggered already since 2019, which corresponds pretty roughly with the general sort of ras-le-bol, which means the people being fed up around the world with US meddling. It's like, we're done here now. We're done. And now we want to see things change. That is all, if you take the example of the BRICS countries, which are now expanding. The people, other countries want to join the BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, um, India, C is China, and S is South Africa. And those countries came together because they were being pushed out, because they were being almost humiliated by the G20, which is originally the G8 or the G7. of the Western economies, and so they created themselves as an answer to this dominance, or this kind of arrogance of the West towards other economies. When did they do that? They did that when Pluto entered into Capricorn, and so now we're seeing, as Pluto goes towards the end of Capricorn, as we come back to today, we're seeing that they are standing up very much against what is perceived as American pressure to conform, pressure to do what is not in their best interest. Unfortunately, EU leaders did not get that memo. And so the European countries are doing lots of things that are not in their interest. And we're watching major economies like Germany collapse under the weight of their own stupidity. Same thing is happening in the UK. Partly from an own goal through Brexit, but especially because of what's going on now with NATO and other political um, international political things that are being kind of driven by the U.S. foreign policy. So we're seeing a lot of this pressure against the United States, and this is part of this pressure of the U.S. Pluto return. And at the same time, just to remind you the situation of the natal chart, the U.S. has Mars at 21 degrees of Gemini. That is opposing the Russian Sun in their chart, for example. But not to dwell on that situation. It basically is a signature for frenemies. So having Mars in the seventh house in Gemini means we don't really know how to make friends. We have frenemies. And so this is also where we have Uranus there, which shows that there's a certain amount of running hot and cold with regards to relationships. It's one day yes, one day no. And so this energy, and again, I'm not American bashing. I'm just saying it as it is. This is me saying what is obvious for anybody who's happy to see it. If you're again in that whole realm of thinking that US is good, the rest of the world is bad, I can't help you. You probably don't want to watch this video. I'm asking you to understand nuance. I'm asking you to understand what is actually behind what we're seeing out in the world right now. And so that house of relationship has been very, very much highlighted since last August, the 20th of August. And speaking of frenemies, if we take the case of the Nord Stream gas pipeline being blown up in September, we see that lo and behold, that was our frenemies. So Europe, most importantly, let's go back by month. We see, the U.S. having already decided that they openly said that they wanted to get rid of that pipeline. Then here we have a situation where on the 29th of September, the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up, and lo and behold, we have Mars conjunct the U.S. Mars, and there it is a couple of days later, passing right over it. And this was, of course, denied naturally, because that's not a good look. But it was very much what was expressed as policy of the United States for years has been to wipe out, or at the very least prevent, and if not prevent, then wipe out the Nord Stream pipeline. This was celebrated by people like Victoria Nuland, who's the Undersecretary of State for the United States, which she, by the way, has been around far too long, but let's say 15 or 20 years. She was already there. Yeah, it's going back more than 20 years. She was already there in the illegal Iraq war, pushing the neocon agenda, which was to say we shall invade Iraq based on a lie. And these are the same people that are dealing with Ukraine right now. Victoria Nuland is famous for having said F Europe when asked about what might happen with regards to US involvement in 2014 in the coup around the democratically elected Ukrainian government. So these are our frenemies. I just want to keep pointing that out because I don't think people are aware. I know that many Americans, and I'm going to have to extend that to North Americans, are very unaware of what's going on in other countries around the world, and very unaware of what the perception of them is around the world. And I think it's helpful to know. If you had friends, you'd want them to be telling you, when things are not going so well for you. And again, I'm not American bashing. I'm just telling you as it is. This is me, almost 40 years of studying and with a master's degree in international politics, and just bringing this into an astrological perspective here. So let's come back to right now. the United States is about to get rid of this Mars finally in the seventh house. And then that Mars is going to go into the eighth house. That's other people's money. This is just on the verge of this banking crisis. And where, of course, is the banks and the money, the values, all of that in the second house where Pluto is already and where Pluto is transiting. And so as we go forward and we see that not only is Pluto leaving, but Mars will be leaving, Pluto going into the third house of banking systems, of social systems as well, and other structures. Third house, by the way, also being neighbors. It's the countries that you're bordering. So in this case, for the U.S., it's basically Canada and Mexico. What do the Americans want to do? Well, they want to send the military into Mexico. I mean, why not? The thing with the Canadians is that the Canadians open the door. So the Canadians don't even like you don't even need the military. The Canadians have just opened the door, and the US basically has taken control, including since the 1960s when they, in fact, intervened in a democratic election in Canada of John Diefenbaker, who Kennedy did not like, and so he was pushed out of office. And so, again, frenemies. This is the U.S. and Canada. You would have thought the besties, the best friends, and the U.S. even goes and intervenes in elections in Canada. So there you are. So now, where's Mars coming up? Mars is coming up onto Venus in the eighth house of what? Other people's money, shared resources. This is loans and debts. There's a lot going on financially right here. And it's not just about this individual banking situation, but it's also about the fact that the Chinese and other countries are no longer going to be buying up US debt, that they are also talking about creating another currency. This is also Pluto in the second house, where the United States will no longer be the reserve, or the US dollar would no longer be the reserve currency. And so this is, I think, also the passage of Mars over the next 6 weeks is really going to show us a lot about what is going to change in terms of debt for the US and in terms of other people's money, how they borrow, how they need to reorganize debt, and especially financial agreements with other countries. That is not going to look very good, I think, for the US in general with regards to international markets. Do we also have, if I come back in time, we have Venus on the North Node, and that is at the same time as the new moon. I have a video on the new moon that you can have a look at if you're interested in that, in what's coming up next week in general terms, the new lunar cycle. It's also the new solar cycle, so it's quite interesting to have a look. And that is happening in the sixth house. What is the sixth house in a mundane chart, in a country's chart? That's the military. That is all the employees, that's all of the people who work, who do the hard work, the laborers, the labor market, the unions, and so on. But in the US case, of course, we see that the military is ruled by Venus. They love their military, lots of money for the military. Why not increase military spending, that since the North Node is there? Or why not increase military activity on the verge of Pluto moving into the house where we're talking about next door neighbors like Mexico? And again, just listen to what the Mexican president said last week and what is under preparation in Congress in terms of changing legislation or changing the capacity for the US to actually go into Mexico. So the other thing that is quite important is, and for here, I want to go back to the 10th of March. The 10th of March is when that Silicon Valley Bank basically was rescued. So again, it's this situation of socialism for the rich. So the government will bail out banks that are supposed to be capitalist and opportunities for investment, opportunities for taking risks to make money, and the federal government is bailing them out, backing them, and yet, if you have, an educational crisis or a health crisis, or if you have a social crisis, or your infrastructure is in critical situation, there's no money for that. There is no money. I'm sorry. So here we're also seeing that we had that conjunction of, and even we could go back to the 1st of March, 1st and 2nd of March, where we had that conjunction of Jupiter, Venus, Chiron. It's opposite Saturn. And so that's as good as saying, so fifth house is what? It's gambling, entrepreneurship. It's that dynamism around taking risks, risk taking in terms of investments and so on. That's fifth house stuff. And here we have Jupiter, Venus, Chiron Chiron, by the way, is going to be coming up for its return very soon. So in the months ahead, US is having its Chiron return starting in the summer. Chiron almost goes up to the US Chiron, and then it will reverse back retrograde until the end of the year, and then come back for the final time in the beginning of 2024. For whether it's final, I'm not sure, because I don't know if it's actually going to back up this far, but let's say for the second time, where that Chiron return, which is about healing sort of the original wound, as it were. Um, and this is also, by the way, a house of education and children and so on, ruled by Mars. It's like, yeah, whatever. We don't really care. We're more into the military. We're more into the how to make money. And so this conjunction, this triple conjunction, really has been playing out for the last 2 weeks in opposition to Saturn. What is Saturn in the 11th house? Well, Saturn in the 11th house is the people. Saturn always represents the hoi polloi. It represents the masses. It represents the people who do the heavy lifting. And Saturn in the 11th house is set people in society, people in the social groups, the people who are basically supporting the economy, ruled by Venus, which has just opposed it with that Jupiter and Chiron. And Chiron and Jupiter continue to oppose it for another few days, in fact. So it continues all the way. I'm going to give it let's be generous. We'll give it a 3-degree orb. And so that means up until, hey ho, it's up until Pluto goes into the third house. So intense times. This is intense times. This is the risk takers take all. The house gets the win. If you're thinking in terms of gambling, the house gets the win, and the people, the taxpayers, will pay. Don't worry. The taxpayers will pay what is being asked of them, largely because they have no choice. So I don't want to dwell on this particular chart. I just want to expose, oh wait, one more thing. I have to just say this. The Saturn, of course, has just gone into the fourth house. What is the fourth house? The fourth house is your security. It's what is, it's all property. It's what you can tangibly see and touch and hold in terms of what makes you feel grounded and secure. It's also a sense of emotional security. And when Saturn goes through the fourth house, it's usually challenging all of that. It's going to require a sense of doing something to put it back in order, do something to make that work for you, whether that's personally or as a country. And so here we now have, at the same time as all of the rest of what I've described is going on, we now have Saturn going into the US fourth house. Interesting times, to say the least. The fourth house can also be the actual land, and when Saturn is going through there, that can also represent weather, by the way, in a weird way. Fourth house is weather. And so there can be, with Saturn going through there, some real issues around fluctuations between drought and like landslides and too much rain, not enough rain, the flooding, all of the chaotic extremes of weather as Saturn is going through the fourth house for the US. And so this is particularly the case, I think, this time around because of all of the other extreme transits. So buckle up. I'm not saying this to make you afraid. It's not about bashing Democrats or Republicans or the United States or any of this. It's about being clear, eyes wide open, walk into the situation that we're in with a certain amount of hesitancy, skepticism, healthy skepticism. Recognize that we need to really think deeply about what's going on, because what we're seeing on the surface is not what is true. Pluto is about finding truth. Fundamentally, it's one of the big keywords for Pluto is finding truth, finding power, or working on power, working power over, power under, power with, finding your inner power, and transformation, of course. And fundamentally, it's about overcoming fear. Finding the fear, dealing with it, understanding where it's coming from, and working towards that truth with a capital T that Pluto is ultimately pushing us to find. So whether that's our personal truth, the inner truth, or the truth of a situation that we have brewing around us socially, this should be the ultimate priority. Do not treat your neighbor as the enemy. Be careful of judging other people for their beliefs, because you want to understand to what extent you are being manipulated to do so, And very, very often you'll find that you'll have so much more in common with the people around you and even with the people in the comments section on YouTube videos than you do with those people who appear to be leading the governments and the institutions that are ruling us at this stage. So I wish you all success. I wish you all financial abundance and health. I wish you all the success in overcoming your own personal situation, whatever, however heavy that might be for you, and trying to work through the highest possible manifestation of transformation. That, of course, will help you do that socially and become an agent of transformation in your community, in your country, and even, who knows, just online. So, if you're interested in this kind of thing, I'm very happy to do more of that. Very ready to hear lots and lots of hate in the comments. It's okay, bring it on. I've heard worse. So, best wishes to all of you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.